The next speaker probably does not need much of an introduction. I will tell the quick little story of when I was a grad student and I was studying Henry Miller and looking at these books that were all published by Roger Jackson. And I just kept wondering to myself, what type of guy is Roger Jackson that he would put out all of these books? And it's with great pleasure and to my great surprise, I'd like to introduce Roger Jackson.
The basis of my talk is included within the booklet that would have been in the items that you picked up. I'm going to add commentary to what we have in the booklet, and I'm going to talk about 5 different projects, and 3 of them takes a little bit of time. If time gets short, I can go through the last 2 in about 2 minutes, which won't be a problem. In the fall of 2005, I got a very unexpected telephone call from a psychotherapist working in Los Angeles and telling me that in his apartment he had 4 large storage containers filled with archival material, books, photographs, and manuscripts and letters from Henry Miller. He said that it became a part of an inheritance that he received from Barbara Miller, Henry's elder daughter. The reason for his call was that he said the appraisal has been done on all of this material, and while he was a fan, he knew of Henry Miller and he knew people that talked about him. He was not necessarily a fan of Henry Miller, and he wanted to get rid of this material. He wanted someone who could find a buyer, and would I be interested? Of course. And then he said, would you be able to fly out to California and take a look at it? No problem with that. Over the years, I'd had contact with Barbara, usually to get permission to do one of my projects, but also I had a long conversation with her about coming to California and looking through her materials because I knew she would have something that I had never seen before. So bibliographically, I was very interested in seeing the material. She told me that her mother, Beatrice, Henry's first wife, had the material kept secret from her, and she didn't know this material existed until her mother died in 1984. Barbara would have been 65 at the time. She said she read the material once, she put it in the closet, and unfortunately I would not be able to see it. It stayed in her closet for 18 years. But after speaking with the therapist, I knew that I would soon have a chance to see this material. So 3 of the projects that I'm talking about came from that stash of material that was inherited by the psychotherapist in California. The first is a group of 34 love letters that was written by Miller between 1915 and 1921 and covers their engagement period, and their marriage in 1917, the birth of their daughter Barbara in 1919. And in those letters you see very strongly that Miller's comments places him in a position where he's more interested most of the time in the piano than he is in with writing. Also, I should note that these letters, 34 letters over 100 years old, all unpublished, are currently at the Harry Ransom Center at the University of Texas. The second item that was in this collection was Beatrice's tell-all book. In the 1960s, when Henry became very famous, she was well aware that the world was aware of what Henry had talked about her. She wanted the world to know what it was like to live with Henry and all the things that they needed to know, including her daughter, Barbara. In that 65-page tell-all booklet, she does talk about some of the good things, how they met and what attracted her to Miller, their marital difficulties, and why Henry always considered her to be a prude. As part of this process in telling her story, she took copies of The World of Sex, My Life and Times, and annotated them, drawing the line under this phrase, at the lie. He wasn't there. I didn't do it. And sometimes she would put in a place a different name of a person that Henry had in his published books. She also included 13 pages of anecdotes, one of which that struck me was of contacts she had with one of Henry's bosses at Western Union. The reason for the contact, according to the man, was that he wanted to explain to her, a young mother with a small child, while Henry was no longer working at Western Union. And he said that we had tolerated Henry's antics, and that was the word, his antics, for a long time. But when he began to sell imported candies at work to other employees, it had to stop. And Barbara lists at the end, she puts down two questions. Did he quit or was he fired? As I went through the material, the first thing that you noticed was that the letters that Miller had written to Beatrice were all typed carbon. There was no originals. And you can't imagine a person writing love letters to your lady and doing that, giving her the carbons and you keeping the originals. I don't think. Fortunately, Barbara answers that question as to what happened and why that is in her tell-all book. I had kept these letters, and while the divorce was pending, in front of him, I tore them all up. I tore them up. And shortly afterwards, I found all of the typed carbons in the book closet. Either the girl upstairs had let him into the house on some excuse or some other way he got in, and he left them for me. I am sure that he thought they were so good that I would fall in love with him again and take him back. I still find it amazing that Barbara would receive, or Beatrice would receive the material, destroy it, and then 2 or 3 days later get the typed carbons and then hang on to them for 60 years. But that's exactly what she did. Some of her friends told her, convinced her that she should not go ahead and have this book published with this material. And their reasoning was that, first of all, nobody is going to believe it, and you may be just causing trouble for yourself. So it was never published, but that too is at the University of Texas. Now, before I get to the third item of note, I want to mention a second group of letters, and this is referenced on page 3 of the little booklet, the letters that Miller wrote to Bertha Schrank in 1931 when he was in Paris. Bertha and Joe Schrank, we have a photograph of them on the bottom of the page 2. They were one of the couples that provided Miller with his once-a-week meal. Their meal was on Monday for him. They did it in exchange for the conversation that Henry brought to the table, but also because they felt good in helping a writer during his lean years. Now, both Henry and Bertha appear in Tropica Cancer as Tanya and Sylvester. Now, Henry became involved with an affair with Bertha that became very energetic during the summer of 1931 when husband Joe went back to New York for a business trip. The little lady that you see that's pictured at the bottom here, the two photographs of Bertha Schrank, was the inspiration for certainly the most notorious paragraph that appears in Tropica Cancer. She was also the inspiration for the most obscene paragraph that appears in Tropica Cancer. It appears on page 5 of the published book, but in your booklet I did reproduce this particular paragraph, and it's a paragraph that shows Miller with a lot of anger towards her. At the time when they broke up, Miller had asked her if she would please return his love letters to her, because there were parts of them that he wanted to insert within Tropica Cancer. And Bertha said, no, I destroyed them, you'll never see them again. In fact, that set Miller off, and he wrote a letter to his friend Emil Snellick indicating that he was desperate to get those letters to put them in cancer. But it never happened. However, Bertha kept those letters for her life, and about 3 or 4 years before she died, she gave her material to a trusted friend. And then after her death, about 3 or 4 years after that, the material was sold to the New York Public Library. That material, the collection material between Beatrice Wickens and Bertha Schrank, as a group, is 140 text pages. There's a lot of period photos from that time and the period for both of them. If a person would add an introduction and you put in footnotes and you put in an index and you do the proper formatting, you're going to have one of the best books imaginable that is possible today, with material that's between 90 and 100 years old. And most of the photographs would not have been seen by most of the fans and Miller people. They've not been published, hardly. And if someone asked me what would be the number one answer to the question, what's next in the world of Henry Miller publishing, to me it would be that book of those letters. And it would have to be done by a mainstream publisher. At least it deserves to be. Certainly someone that has a bigger marketing staff than what I have. Now I want to go back quickly to the first telephone call that I had with the therapist in 2005. And during that period of time, I asked him, in your collection, do you have any of Henry Miller's Metzel tints? Those little 6x9-inch cards that he printed up in 1925 and distributed. I have some on display over in the next building if you've never seen the Henry Miller Metzel tint, or some that are over there. And he said, wait a minute, I've got the appraisal right here, just give me a second. He gets back with me and he says, no, there's nothing here. There's nothing on the appraisal that indicates there's any Metzel tints. And it's a pretty detailed appraisal. Well, I was just defecate. I felt awful. I felt absolutely awful. Now, I know a collection, among collectors, there's a shared fantasy, and that fantasy is no less than winning the state lottery, is that one of these days we may go to a book show, or not a book show, but say a garage sale, or maybe an estate sale, and we'll pick up some old books, and inside there will be a Metzel tint, just one little Metzel tint, you know. Or maybe up in my grandfather's attic years ago when I first thought about it, and I did think about it, maybe one of those books or some of those books had at least one Metzel tint that was in that collection that he had up in the attic. We know for sure that they are the rarest of all the publications that Miller was ever involved with. Now, my own fascination with them had me to bring out a facsimile edition in 1993, the same year that Volume 1 of the bibliography came out. And at that time, there were 7 known original Metzel tints. All of them existed at UCLA. All of them had been given to them directly by Henry Miller. At the time that I did the publication, we did have the text of an 8th Metzel tint, and that one I also formatted, and so it was published as the 8 known Metzel tints that existed at the time. Now, for anyone who might believe that the idea of finding a Metzel tint at an estate sale or in somebody's attic is just too fanciful to note, I got to tell you about the follow-up call that I got from the therapist later that week. Mr. Jackson, after we spoke, it occurred to me that I probably needed to get out those storage bins and go through them and look at them one by one to see if I couldn't find any of those things that you were looking for. And he says, I think I found what you're looking for. He says, I found this brown envelope on the bottom of one of the tubs. It was surrounded by scrap paper, and it was partially covered by some of the other books. And he began to read to me the titles of what he had before him. And in that tattered envelope was 14 original Metzel tints, 5 of which are considered sole surviving copies. Mr. Jackson, he says, why didn't the appraiser indicate that we had these in my collection? Don't they have value? Absolutely, they have value. They have considerable value, but the appraiser saw the tattered piece of paper, didn't think anything was in it, never bothered to pick it up, and as a result, was completely unaware of some of the most valuable items in the world of Henry Miller. So a new publication, and that what I put down on page number 4, I list all of the surviving Metzel tints as we know them as of today. In addition to the ones that were at UCLA, in addition to the ones that I just spoke about, in 1999, the collection of Emo Snellick came on the market, and that collection included 4 Metzel tints. Actually, it included 6. 4 of the Metzel tints were included in the sale, and 2 of them were kept by the dealer for 11 years, and then he sold them to a private individual because he needed to replace his old truck. All the surviving Metzel tints are listed on this page, and there's 27 individual Metzel tints. We have 14 individual titles. So a new publication, a duplicate publication, would extend that 8-copy edition and go up to 14. I think it's very unlikely that we'll see any more Metzel tints survive because each of the 3 groups were placed here, at least indirectly, by Miller himself. One group to this person, one group to his wife, one group to his friend Emo Snellick. Okay. That would be number 3. We're doing pretty good on time here. Let me just check something right here. Okay. All right, good. The letters to Emo Snellick obviously have been published. Miller thought, and many people think they were some of the best letters that he ever wrote. He wanted them published in the 1930s. He talked to Bern Porty about doing them in the 1940s. In 1969, there was a group of them put together, and it was delayed. There was nothing happened to them. It wouldn't be until 1989 that New Directions would bring out the first edition of the letters that Miller wrote to Emo Snellick. The problem is they are so heavily edited, it makes me want to scream. The book was published with 158 pages, and we know that there are approximately 200 cuts that was made in that collection. One of the cuts runs at least 27 pages. I gave an example on one of the pages here, on page 5, and that was another cut, one of the 200 cuts. And then the question is for an individual to read through that, see how rich in content it is, and then wonder why would anybody in the right mind cut that from the book. So a new edition of the letters to Emo Snellick would probably be at least, I don't know, 3 times, maybe 3 times the size of the one we have right now. Whether it will ever be done again, I have no idea. Now, the letters currently are owned by the Henry Miller Library. They're going to be sold or they're going to be taken somewhere, but I'm sure they would continue to have copies of all 187 of them. Okay, I'm going to take 30 seconds. I have a 6-page bibliography of the published works by Carl Ornd. That name surfaced over the conference. Although his proposed biography of Miller is complete, it's unpublished, and it's 20 years late in having it published. But during those 20 years, he has published over 50 items, articles in journals, and 22 books documenting his work in progress. Most of them are unknown, were done in small editions of 15 to 150 copies. People would not know about them. So with the information that's here, you will know each of the 52 items that he's published. All the ones that appeared in Nexus are in print. The small booklets that he did leading up to his biography, those are very difficult to find. But they're all important enough for researchers and readers to know about them and seek to get them. So thank you.